Chris Williams.
And I'm Derek Castro.
And this is the Live Network. Breaking news today, and I mean breaking news. Heavy topic coming in today in America concerning cultural appropriation and the police brutality that many people face today.
What isn't there to say about this? Records show unarmed African Americans are twice as likely to be gunned down by police officers. They are supposed to protect and serve all, but who are they really serving? Here's Nicholas McClurkin on interviewers on cultural appropriation and African American police brutality.
In a few moments, we're about to go interview a student from A&T named Dante, and we're going to ask his opinions about cultural appropriation. Alright, Dante, I wanted to ask you, what is cultural appropriation in your own words?
I feel that cultural appropriation is that like integration of cultures. So like for example, like maybe like the black culture integrates the Asian culture, or the white culture integrate the black culture.
Can you give us any examples of cultural appropriation that you see there?
Okay, well I think a couple of examples will be like Justin Bieber wearing dreadlocks. I feel like he incorporated our culture into his lifestyle, and I also feel like white rappers in hip hop are appropriating our culture. Like for example, like Mac Miller and I can't really say Logic, but Macklemore, rappers like that.
Hey, do you think there's any relation between cultural appropriation and the police brutality of African Americans?
I feel like there isn't a cultural relation or a cultural appropriation with police, since they're actually committing these actions. I feel like if they incorporated our culture, they will understand what our struggles are, and therefore I feel like all this police brutality wouldn't happen, and sentences wouldn't be like uneven between like African Americans and Caucasians.
Thank you, Dante. Dante was a great interviewer. He answered our questions straightforward. I really liked his answers. Not many people may agree with his points, especially his last ones, but they were good points nonetheless.
Answers from a fellow African American, don't you think, Chris?
Yes, I agree with the interviewer's answers. People who use African American culture and understand what they go through should stand up for the culture, especially when good people are being beaten and are killed by police officers who chose to uphold the law. It's not just their culture when it shits the fans, your culture. Now here's Julian Harris with his interviews.
So, in your own words, how would you describe cultural appropriation?
To me, cultural appropriation is when one culture adopts certain traits of another culture and they use it as their own. Like, a lot of people got angry when white people adopted certain aspects of black culture, when they started using slang or started dressing a certain way. A lot of people got insulted about it, but that's just a small example of what cultural appropriation.
Cultural appropriation, I believe, is the use of our culture by other people. For example, white rappers who dress up as black people, or who rap the same as blacks, or white people in black churches, or white people at HBCUs.
Appropriation, in my own words, would be defined as one culture or one group of people adapting another culture, like white people adapting a black person's culture, or black people adapting like an Indian person's culture, so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I think for the most part. Like if I were to do something that strictly like is of a black culture, I would be culturally appropriating a black culture.
Like getting box braids or something.
Yeah.
Like
hairstyles.
Yes.
who aren't African American but use the African American culture, I believe, don't stand up for African Americans when it does come to police brutality, or white on black crimes. But they're quick to jump on our side when it benefits them, but not when we need help.
Personally, I don't really think there is like a correlation or relationship in it, but I do notice that like some people who take on the black culture, I wouldn't say they aren't anywhere to be found when the police brutality beatings and killings are happening, because when you see at riots and protests, you see other people, other nationalities, other races and stuff there. So I'm not gonna say it doesn't. I don't think it really correlates. It does, but then again, it doesn't.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I don't feel like there's much of a correlation between, but I definitely agree with the fact of like where are the other people who are appropriating this culture when like people on social media are like, black men were all the white women that love you when y'all are being shot in the streets. I definitely agree with that if you're taking on something from another culture, that you should be standing with them in any instance, no matter what.
Exactly.
Well, cultural appropriation for me is taking an intentional approach towards understanding a culture that does not necessarily connect directly with your own in terms of the way you were raised, etc. So it's taking your personal frame of reference and finding opportunities where it intersects with others, and then empathizing with the other culture, and then in essence appropriately, or an appropriation, adopting an understanding of an aspect as to where the other culture is manifesting or growing from. And so an example could be when a man learns to understand the challenges a woman may have in the workplace, or feeling objectified, or something of that nature. So when a man takes the time to be sensitive to the thoughts and the ideas and concerns a woman may have for her safety or being valued as equal, then that man is culturally appropriating that aspect of a culture that a woman has to deal with. So that's an example of cultural appropriation for me, is when that man intentionally says, I want to understand where the other is coming from. And so in the context in which you are describing, let's say, or maybe thinking of police brutality, there is a presumption that police officers in general, maybe particularly non-black police officers, may not have intentionally made the efforts to understand the culture, the frame of reference in which most African Americans, most African American males, understand the world. And so if they haven't taken the time to appropriate that understanding, to intentionally have a grasp of it, then it's possible that that is one of the reasons why the police brutality has continued to manifest itself throughout society. Now, police brutality is not new. This is something that's been taking place all throughout our history, because we may have been perceived as the other, and put quotation marks around other. Cultural appropriation would suggest that you take the time to intentionally understand and empathize what's happening with the other. So if police have not taken that time to do that, then the possibility of an interaction turning into an altercation could take place because that police officer may not have learned to put himself into or submerge himself into what that individual, African American male or female, experiences. And that keeps them from empathizing and understanding the other. Hence, they did not or have not experienced a cultural appropriation from a perspective of African Americans, African American males. Now, I want to put a caveat. Because of the fact that we are in an information age of some sorts, we are much more aware of what happens across the country in terms of police brutality. But because of the fact that we were not in the information age before, I think it's safe to assume that police brutality was much broader and much worse in the past. So we potentially could be seeing an improvement, but we just don't know it because we don't know what all the documentations were that that took place earlier. If we were to go back to 40s, 50s, 60s, and even the 70s. So it wasn't until the late 80s that, people became much more aware. In the 90s in terms of the internet, and then of course here now in 2016 and the cell phones, we see things that we didn't see before. There may have been improvements and we just don't know it. It doesn't change the fact that we want to completely stamp it out. So I liken it to the cultural appropriation of men understanding the plight of women, and vice versa, because the intent is to really understand the historical ramifications that affect our behaviors today within a specific culture. And that's the way I view cultural appropriations and how it would be beneficial for us to have grasped it and shared it and allow it to manifest so that others won't use ignorance to allow their behaviors to assert actions like police brutality.
People forget that cultural appropriation stretches not only to race but gender also.
Exactly. With interviewers, especially Dr. Williams Davis, gave amazing answers on this aspect. We thank them all for all their answers.
And hope that people of every race, gender, and culture learn to understand one another and stop the hate that is being passed down to new generations.
This is a new day and age for all people who have human rights to live side by side. Do unto others as you want done unto you.
I'm Chris.
And I'm Derek, and this is Libs Network.